for a launch of the political process. And in that regard, we're waiting for the creation by the government of Yemen, under the Riyadh Agreement, as you know, one mediated by the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, of a new negotiating team on the back of a new cabinet. So we're very interested to see progress towards that happen. And if that happens over the next month or two, we will be ready to call the parties to sit down together, to talk, and finally to negotiate, and finally to launch that political process. I don't believe that political process should be very long. I don't believe it should be lengthy, but I think it needs to start in the near future.
There will be people watching this interview who say, what happened to Stockholm? What happened to the Riyadh Agreement? You know, there have been many periods when we have said it feels like an opportunity here for a solution.
In support of the Stockholm Agreement, there was, we managed to avoid what I am convinced would have been a major humanitarian catastrophe associated with the battle for Hodeida, and that was prevented, and it still has been prevented. And largely, a ceasefire is held in that governorate since then. So to that extent, given that the Stockholm Hodeida Agreement was about humanitarian issues, to that extent it has succeeded. But it has obviously failed to do much of what it was also intending, which was to redeploy the forces, to demilitarize the city and the ports.
One thing that has happened is that the UAE has withdrawn its troops. How has that impacted the conflict on the ground, if at all?
Well, I think it was an extraordinary decision by the Emirates, and I think it was very carefully thought through. They consulted me quite frequently, and also, of course, their coalition partners in the government of Yemen. And I think it's had a positive impact. It was also a statement which I think everybody shares now, which is that this war is militarily unwinnable. And largely, with the exception of some gains in the last few weeks, the lines of battle in Yemen have stayed more or less static for the last year or two.
You came in as envoy in 2018. What were your biggest concerns back then, and how have they changed?
I wondered then if Yemen was a conflict that was slipping away from solutions, that with regional interests, that with the polarized rhetoric, that we would see another Syria. And I discovered quite soon, actually, during my time, which started 2 years ago, that in fact Yemen could precisely do that if we didn't urgently remind people of the alternative. If you don't move towards a political solution, you don't stay where you are, you move backwards, you move into war.
You were an advisor for 3 Syria envoys.
Yes.
You're telling me that it's easier than Syria?
I think it is easier than Syria, thank goodness. So Yemen has a recent history of being able to resolve differences. And I have found, in talking to Yemenis of all different stripes, but particularly perhaps the political class, that there's an openness to compromise and concession, which is not so evident elsewhere.
After a US drone strike that killed the leader of al-Qaeda's Yemen branch, that seemed to deal a blow to the group's ambitions. But there are warnings from Western experts now that a recent escalation in this conflict could allow the group to regroup once again, and we see reports of a new leader. How worried are you?
There is a unified view among Yemeni groups that there should be no truck with al-Qaeda or Daesh. And so far, we haven't seen it become an existential threat. But if we allow Yemen to drift, whether in the south or the north, if we allow this war to continue beyond where it is at the moment, we will see them flourish, and they will prosper, and they will rise. So we must make sure that we get back to the business of stopping the war.